Hi.
Hello guys, welcome back to Nikki's Book Nook. It is a very dreary and freezing cold, disgusting day in Houston, which means it is great reading weather. I just finished Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy by Cassandra Clare and several other co-authors, which is a whole topic we'll get into. But yes, we're just gonna talk about this today. Many thoughts. If you watched my video before this, I am knee deep in the Shadowhunter series. I'm a little over halfway through now. I had just read the Bane Chronicles before this. I kind of had some mixed feelings on it. I felt like some of the stories were really great. They gave you some nice like background information, like fun stories that really filled in the gaps, where others were just kind of like pointless. But overall, I did like that book. Like I was kind of like, in the scheme of the whole series, I was like, this is kind of like low on the bar, but I like it. This compared to that, like Bane Chronicles, I'm like, you were amazing. This book just like really disappointed me, and I hate to say that. It's been my least favorite of the whole Shadowhunter series so far. I'm not even quite sure where to begin. Actually, if you watched my former review, you will know, and just from all my videos in general, I'm a rambler. I like to ramble, and don't worry, I'm still gonna ramble, but this time I'm going to ramble with notes. I took notes on each of the chapters because this is a hefty book, y'all. This is like the thickest book in the Shadowhunter series. Besides, like Dark Artifices is really thick. This is bigger than Heavenly Fire. Like it was like almost 700 pages. So Draco, I'm gonna need you to stop. But yeah, so the entire like basis of this book is about Simon. It is a Simon-centered book. We know at the end of Heavenly Fire that yes, he's lost his memories because he, you know, gave himself up to Asmodeus. He lost his immortality. He's no longer a vampire. He's a human. But Magnus and everyone kind of figured out if he ascends, he becomes a Shadowhunter, he will get all of his memories back. Magnus can help him out a little bit. But yeah, he's gonna go to the Shadowhunter Academy. He's gonna train for 2 years in their program, and then he's going to ascend and hopefully become a Shadowhunter. So I was definitely interested to see that. I was like, okay, you know, Simon was not my favorite character in the Mortal Instruments in the beginning, especially. I found him so annoying. I felt like he was so just like in the way. Like I know he's meant to be that like dorky best friend character, but once he became a vampire, it's funny like how much Simon grew on me. I'm usually like, I was gonna say I'm not easily swayed, but maybe I am. I like the basic characters. Like I was a big Will girl, I was a big Jace girl. Simon, I was like, but as the story went on, I loved him as a vampire. I loved him in Isabel's relationship. Like I got really attached to Simon, so it absolutely broke me in half whenever he was gonna lose all of his memories and forget all of his friends. Like it made me so upset, but as Cassandra Clare does, literally like 2 pages later, it's like, everything's fine. Let's all hold hands around the campfire, which I don't love. I feel like you have to have some grief and sorrow in a series, or it's like, it can't all just be like rainbows all the time, you know? That's another story. Anyway, so when I actually started this book, I was under the impression, I thought that the Bane Chronicles, this book, and Ghosts of the Shadow Market were all like a short story sort of thing. So I was expecting it to be like the Bane Chronicles, where it like jumped around. So I was kind of confused about how it was supposed to be about Simon, but also jump around. Once I started reading though, it became clear that's not what it is. I ended up looking it up. So this is actually what's considered like novellas. So they're like long short stories, but they're still like kind of in chronological order. It's hard to explain. Like this is a very weird concept type of book to me, because you read it and you start it, and I mean, it's literally a story. Like it is like, it feels like a part of the Mortal Instruments almost. But in between, there's all of these like side stories and like flashbacks. So each of the chapters are like 80 to 100 pages. There are a couple that are like 50, but most of them are like 80 pages, which I hate. I don't like when chapters are that long, because I am a person, I like to finish at a chapter, and I always, every night, you know, you're reading and you're like, oh, just one more chapter. You can't do the just one more chapter with this, because it's like just one more chapter is gonna take you like an hour and a half, you know, like at least. Like it's just, the chapters were too long for me and I didn't love that. So I just kind of want to go through the general, like I took notes on each of the like stories and just kind of talk about it. just so you can get a feel for why I'm not obsessed with this book, and also like why I thought the format of it was strange, and just all of the co-authors just made it feel, I don't know, not the same. So let's just get into it. So this story starts out, the first story is literally called, or story or chapter, I don't know what to refer to it as. It's called Welcome to the Shadowhunter Academy. And it becomes very clear right from the beginning, this book is major like Harry Potter vibes, but not in a great way. So the Shadowhunter Academy is in Idris. So it starts out, Simon's, you know, in New York, and he's having, you know, we learn that he's explained to his mother that he's going to a military school, and he's still in this phase where he has like some of his memories, but not most of them, and his relationships with everyone is kind of weird, because it's like they all obviously remember him, but he doesn't remember them, but he's trying, and he's getting little flashes of memory here and there. Isabel is very, as she is, you know, she doesn't like being vulnerable, she doesn't like showing her feelings, and she very much opened herself up to Simon, but now like he doesn't remember her. So I understand that that's very hard. So there's kind of like tension there. So yeah, the story starts, and he's goes to the Institute to portal to Idris to go to the Shadowhunter Academy. And you know, you get there and it's an old building, very kind of Hogwarts-esque, and right away you get the feeling, you learn that there's kind of like two groups of people at the academy. There's the like natural born shadow hunters, and there's what are called dregs or dredges. It's D-R-E-G-S, dregs. Basically like mundane born people who had special abilities that have been sought out and now are going to try to actually ascend and become shadow hunters, versus shadow hunters that are obviously born with that blood. They're just there to train and get better. They're obviously going to be shadow hunters at the end, where mundanes, like, you know, they have to drink from the cup and there's a chance that they will not ascend. Just kind of depends if they're not like worthy or whatever. So, you know, right away Simon gets there, and he's a little bit of a celebrity, because he's known, you know, he's saved the world multiple times over. He was the guy who became a downworlder vampire that was friends with shadow hunters, the most like famous shadow hunters, Jace Herondale, oh my gosh, Clary Fairchild. Like everybody knows of the Lightwoods, of Jace, of Clary, like everyone knows about that. They know that like Simon fought in the Great War and he ultimately saved everyone. And you know, now he's a mundane, but he's still like looked upon as like a celebrity at the academy. Everyone knows who Simon is. So he shows up, and like a lot of the shadow hunters immediately like cling on him and like want to be his friends, but the whole time he's hanging out with them, he's like, you know, they're talking badly about the dregs. It's very like muggles or like half-bloods or mudbloods sort of thing. So when Simon shows up, we're introduced to his roommate. He's George Lovelace, who we know is kind of somewhat a descendant from Jessamine Lovelace from Infernal Devices. The Lovelaces have been disgraced. They never really were great shadow hunters, kind of like inferring to Jessamine and all of that stuff. But they're roommates, they hit it off. He's like this tall, hot Scottish guy. And yeah, they're hanging out with the shadow hunters, but Simon gets kind of pissed off about them talking so badly about mundanes and downworlders. He's like, I am a mundane and I was a downworlder, like, you know, holier than thou attitude. So he ends up switching routes. He's like, I'm gonna be in the dredges route, which is like, what? No, you don't want to do that, because they live like down in the basement and it's slimy and like they're looked down upon. But you know, here's Simon, who is a celebrity, wants to go. It's just very Harry Potter-esque, you know? He's like, whatever, I'm not special, I'm gonna go be with the dredges. And so Katarina Loss, Magnus's friend, the warlock lady, she is teaching at the academy, so he goes and he tells her. She's like, oh, daylighter, whatever, sure, you can, I don't know. So yeah, he switches to the dredges route. It's basically the whole first chapter and what happens. Yeah. Oh, and so this is like a common reoccurrence throughout the whole book. People like guest lecture, like guest lectures show up, and literally in the first chapter, the first guest lecturer is Isabel. Like she just shows up and she's there to lecture, and once the teacher leaves the room, she's like, I'm not actually here to lecture, I'm just here to tell you that Simon Lewis is my boyfriend, and if any of you touch him, I will kill you. Is essentially like what she did. And I'm like, right away, I'm like, hold the phone. Isabel would never, like that did not feel very Isabel to me at all. I hated it. And there are multiple instances of that throughout the story where characters don't act like themselves, and I feel like it has to do with the 3 co-authors. Not blaming them, but I just like, each story is written by Cassandra and one of the 3 co-authors, so I don't know. I'm like, how much free reign does she give them? How much does she really proofread this? I'm like, because Isabel would never do that. And so Simon, yeah, obviously gets mad. He's like, Isabel, like, you know, you're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen, but like, I don't remember dating you. Like, I don't remember us being together. Like, you need to give me some space, like, to figure this out, blah, 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 whatever. That's the end of the first chapter. I was like, okay, you know, I'm intrigued. I'm here. I'm gonna keep going. Let's see. Y'all, I'm gonna try to speed it up. This review is gonna literally be like 25 minutes long. I apologize. So the next chapter is called The Lost Herondel. Essentially this chapter, they have a guest speaker. I can't remember what his name was. It wasn't that important. But he's there to talk about the importance of like, the #1 rule of being a Shadowhunter essentially is to not be a coward. Like, you're gonna fight, whatever, you're a warrior, blah, blah, blah. So he tells the story of Tobias Herondel in 1828, and he was a coward because he had a wife and she was pregnant, but he had to go into battle and he was too worried about his wife, and he abandoned the other Shadowhunters, and the 3 of them died, and then he disappeared, and because he disappeared, his wife was punished for it, and she was pregnant at the time. She was literally like put to death in place of the husband when she had a child in her. It's like, okay, interesting. And you also learn, which she does this a lot, I find it so confusing. So many people in this story have the same name. There's so many freaking Jonathans. You know, we have like Jace, and then Jonathan / Sebastian, and then Jonathan Shadowhunter, and then there's a new John in this book, John Cartwright. He's like the bully of the school. It's a whole thing. But yeah, Tobias is like son of Will Herondel, but not the Will Herondel we know, like Will Herondel's grandpa. I'm just like, you're making this unnecessarily confusing. But anyways, yes, after we like learn about the story, basically moral of the story, don't be a coward. Okay, great. Not a very uplifting story. So then Simon and a couple of the other people get sent to go like take care of a rogue vampire. They're portaled, and it's like, oh, we're in New York. Of course, interesting. So he has to like take care of this vampire, and he, whatever, almost gets like killed by the vampire, and guess who swoops in? Isabel. Okay, like I guess we're just gonna swoop in every 5 seconds. And yeah, they have a whole, again, they're just kind of back and forth arguing, and then the end of that chapter, Katerina Loss ends up revealing to Simon that actually, back whenever Tobias Herondel's wife was punished, she made a deal with her to make, like, she saved her baby, essentially. She took the baby, made it look like she was still pregnant, and then she died. She raised the baby. So I assume, this is never referenced again in the book. I was like, oh, okay, which I'm kind of annoyed by, because that is literally like the same storyline as the whole like Jace thing, like him being taken from his mother who we thought was dead. It's literally a repeating story. I'm kind of like annoyed about it. But yeah, I assume that's gonna come up later, probably in Dark Artifices, because it's never referenced in this book again. So, which essentially, like, now we know there's a whole other line of Herondels. We think that Jace is the final Herondel, and when we didn't think that he was alive, like when we thought the Herondel child died, we thought that like the whole bloodline died, which was very sad, because it's like Tessa and Will's bloodline, and it's like, it's over, but it's not. Jace is still there, but now we know there's like a whole nother line of Herondels out there somewhere. I assume that'll be important. Cool. Okay, next chapter, the Whitechapel Fiend. Guess who comes to guest lecture? Jace. He's teaching people how to jump out of trees. You know, I like seeing the characters that we know and love, but I just find it really odd, because in Mortal Instruments, going to Idris was such a big deal. Like, it was like, oh, we're going to Idris, oh, get a portal ready, blah, blah, blah. In this book, it's like, oh, we're just gonna go to Idris, just down the street. Like, they just show up to the academy at any given time, like all of these characters. And the whole point at the beginning, Simon's like, oh, I know I'm supposed to love these people, but I don't know them, so I have to get away from them, spend time on my own to figure out who I am. But then yet he like goes there, and literally every 5 seconds it's like, oh, hey, Isabel, hey, Jace, hey, Clary, what's up? Like, they just show up, which I just felt, I don't know, annoying. But yeah, Jace is teaching them how to jump out of trees, and then him and Simon end up bonding, because Jace is like, I don't really feel like I know my past either. Like, you don't remember your memories, but now I'm like, I'm a Herondel, and I always thought I was, you know, a Wayland and then a Morgenstern, so I feel like I vibe with you. Like, we're both trying to figure out like who we are and who we were supposed to be, and blah, blah, blah. Also in this chapter, Tessa, who we love, my heart and soul. She comes and gives a guest like speech, lecture, whatever, which this was actually a pretty interesting story. She gives this whole story about, she's there to talk about stories, about how a lot of stories in history have actually been cover-ups for things that happen in the Shadowhunter world to keep the mundanes like unaware, and that Jack the Ripper, that whole situation was actually like a demon situation, and her and Will, so this is where it becomes like the short story situation. As she starts to like tell her lecture, it like flips and it's a story now, and we're back in like Victorian era, whatever, and like it's Jason, Will, and Cecily, and Tessa, and Jim, and or brother Zachariah, I guess, at that point, and they're like battling Jack the Ripper. It's like a whole like 40-page short story within the chapter, which was cool. Interesting, I guess. But yeah, at the end of it, I think Simon ends up talking to Jason, putting two and two together, like, hey, you should talk to Tessa, I think you guys are related, blah blah blah. Then Simon writes Izzy a letter, minor details. Next chapter, oh, the next chapter is called Nothing But Shadows. This gives you a whole side story about James Herondale and Matthew Fairchild. So James Herondale is Tessa and Will's son, who they called Jamie. Again, like the names Jim and James and Jamie and whatever. Yes, this chapter, Katerina Loss is telling Simon about them, I guess, and it's a whole side story about James Herondale and Matthew Fairchild and how they went to the academy together. They didn't like each other at first, and James was a dreg because he wasn't very good. Even though he was like Will's son, he kind of was like a scrawny kid and he wasn't good at fighting. And we end up finding out at the academy, whenever he's almost killed by something like hitting him, he turns into a shadow, which we did see in Bane Chronicles. So essentially he's part warlock because Tessa is a warlock and whatever, a bit of a warlock, a bit of Shadowhunter, and Will is Shadowhunter. He is like 1/4 warlock. So yes, he's a Shadowhunter, but he also has like this warlock in him, which is very like scandalous. The academy like wants him out. People are like afraid of him. Like he's whatever, like tainted, blah, blah, blah. Matthew and James end up becoming Parabatai. I say Parabatai, I don't think that's the right way to say it, but yeah. Cool. I mean, it's not like this story was like bad or anything, but it's just like, okay, like it was just kind of boring, and I'm not entirely, like, it just didn't feel, it felt kind of pointless. Like, unless it's like something that I'm gonna need for later, which maybe I will, it just seemed kind of pointless. Yeah, and it was really long, so. Okay, so the next chapter, I'm upset because I felt like I should have loved it, and I didn't love it at all. The next chapter is called The Evil We Love. Guess who shows up to the academy again? Isabel. She comes with the Inquisitor, who is her dad, and we get this whole backstory of him at the Shadowhunter Academy when he was younger, the early days of the Circle. We see Luke and Valentine and Jocelyn and Maris and Robert Lightwood and Michael Whalen, and Robert are Parabatai. And you know, we learn in the early days that from the beginning, Robert wasn't really feeling it with Maris. We know he ends up cheating on her, but she was in love with him, and he was like, well, whatever, this'll work, blah, blah, blah. I literally had said to myself, I'm like, I would love a whole book of like the early days of the Circle, but something about it was just like literally boring. I can't think of another word to describe it. I feel like Valentine was so unimpressive. Like, Valentine is the villain of all villains, supposedly, even though he's only in the first like 3 books of the Mortal Instrument series. Like, I feel like I should feel something for Valentine, and I just think he was just so boring. Like, there was nothing about him that like sparked like interest to me. And I love the villains. I am a Slytherin through and through. Like, I find the villains fascinating, and Valentine to me was not fascinating in this book at all. But the main part of this story was to talk about what is brought up at the end of Heavenly Fire when Robert is talking to Alec about him being gay, about Alec being gay. He explains that his Parabatai, Michael, had fallen in love with him, which is very like, you're not allowed to fall in love with your Parabatai. Much less like guy falling in love with Shadowhunter guy, very much not allowed. So this kind of tells the story of that, of like Michael admitting that to Robert, Robert calling him disgusting. It's actually like really, a hard kind of story to get through. I mean, I felt so bad for Michael, and it was just horrible, and so that's why he like so quickly gets with Mayris, because he's like, what are people gonna think? And because he didn't feel that way back for him, but even so, he was his absolute best friend and brother, and Parabatai, which is supposed to be like above anything else, and he treated him like garbage, which sucked. But yeah, and then there's this whole side story going on. It's jumping back and forth with that story, and Izzy is being just like annoying. Like, she's going around the academy, she's like trying to make Simon jealous. She's hanging out with John Cartwright and like all the other Shadowhunters, and she's like, what do you guys do for fun around here? Like, you need to sneak out tonight, we need to go do this. And Simon's like, Izzy, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing that? Whatever. And then she ends up convincing all of them that they need to like raise a demon, like not acting like herself, being so dumb. And then Simon finally goes and like tattletales on her, because he's like, she can't raise a freaking demon. And then it's revealed it was all a test to see, and Simon passed the test and blah blah blah. Even if it was a test, Izzy just again didn't seem like herself to me. She's not the confident, strong, independent Izzy that we know. She just seemed like a total like petty, jealous girlfriend that I don't like. Like, I'm like, girl, first of all, have some pride, have some self-respect, and also, Simon doesn't remember you. Like, give this boy a minute. He's not just gonna fall in love with you. Like, he doesn't remember all these years you've spent together. Like, you gotta give him a second. And like, you literally just officially got together 5 seconds before his memories were lost anyways. So just like, give him a sec. It was just really upsetting to me. So the next chapter is called Pale Kings and Princes. This is like, now they're in year 2. They finished their first year at the academy. Summer's over. Simon and Izzy were awkward all summer. They tried to go on a couple dates, didn't really work out. In this story, we see Helen Blackthorn, the fairy girl who's with Aline Penhollow. She comes and she tells the story of her Shadowhunter father ending up with her fairy mother, and how they were technically, him and his brother were trapped in the fairy world, and his brother was tortured while him and her mom actually were in love. Whatever, ends up leaving the world, and then Helen and her brother show up on his doorstep because whatever, he doesn't remember. It's literally an unimportant story. I didn't see the point of it. I'm not even gonna spend any more time on it. Izzy shows up again. Literally every 5 seconds she shows up, and Helen like is like, oh, Simon, she's here, you guys should go on a date. So they go on a date, they finally like kiss. I literally wrote yawn in my notes because it was just boring. We find out Helen and Aline, I say Aline, I don't know if it's Aline or Aline, but they're getting married, and they're being permitted because Helen was banished because she's a fairy to the wards or whatever, some island, and now she gets to come back to Idris for like 1 day to get married, and then they're gonna go back. Okay, whatever. Next chapter, we learn that each of the Shadowhunters in the academy, or each of the people have, like, each take a turn leading a mission, and it's now George's turn to lead a mission, and they have to go investigate some fairy situation. They're riding horses. Simon ends up trying to block George because he's about to step into the fairy territory, and he ends up getting sucked into it. He's in a cage, and then Mark Blackthorn is there, Helen's brother, the one who at the end of Heaven, or in Heavenly Fire, he got sent to the Wild Hunt or whatever, and the Shadowhunters are not coming after him because he's part fairy and whatever. Boring. And Mark is like, are you here to rescue me? And Simon's like, no. And he's like, how are all the kids? Naming the like 47 kids that are in Dark Artifices. Tabby and Drew and what, like, there's so many names. I'm like, Drusilla and Octavian and Tiberius, and I'm like, bro, like, I'm sure I'll get it, but I'm just like, there's so many confusing names and children. But yeah, you'll never guess who jumps out of nowhere to save Simon. Freaking Isabel. Whatever. Like, okay. Then they go to Helen and Alion's wedding. Again, I wrote yawn. The next chapter was called The Fiery Trial. In this chapter, Jem and Clary and Magnus show up. They tell Simon and Clary that Emma and Julian, who are in Dark Artifices, we found in Heavenly Fire, they are gonna become Parabatai, as they said they were going to in Heavenly Fire, and they want Clary and Simon to be their 2 witnesses. Magnus gives them some tea, but it turns out to be water from Lake Lynn, so Simon and Clary start hallucinating. It's some weird, they picture they're in New York, and then they're like in a park, and the fountain like explodes, and then Simon's on like a amusement park ride, and Jace is with him, and I don't know, he ends up seeing Clary in the water and he like has to jump out and save her. Basically, it was like a test to prove that like him and Clary are meant to be Parabatai, essentially. Which we could have seen coming anyways, like they're best friends, so whatever. Then Simon ends up getting a little bit of his memories back about Clary after that, and he recalls that like the moment that he first met Jace, because Jace tells him that in the vision. He's like, do you remember when you first saw me? He's like, I couldn't see you, like Clary first saw you. Whatever, he essentially remembers that's the moment that he was in Java Jones about to tell Clary that he loves her. But that's when he like put 2 and 2 together that he does love Clary, but it's in a different way, and this is the way it's meant to be. Like she's like she's not just his best friend, like he loves her truly, but it's because they're meant to be Parabatai, which I guess is cute, whatever. Yeah, and then they go to Emma and Julian's ceremony, which is like the ceremony of fire. They have to stand in a fiery circle. It's done. Okay, this next chapter was my favorite chapter of the book by a mile. It is the second to last chapter. It was called Born to Endless Night. In this chapter, I think I liked it so much because it felt like I was back in Mortal Instruments. It felt like I was out of this crappy, boring book. All of the characters were in this chapter. Magnus is really focused on Magnus and Alec. Malik, literally my heart and soul, love them so much. I truly never get bored of Magnus and Alec, but Magnus shows up to be a guest lecturer for a week or two or whatever at the academy, and he says that he has to have like a private apartment. He's bringing Alec with him. Cool, he shows up and there is randomly a baby warlock that gets left on the front steps. It has blue skin and there was a note attached to it that said like, who could ever love it? Simon finds the baby and it's like, oh my gosh, let me go get Magnus, try to figure out what to do. Long story short, Magnus and Alec end up keeping this baby, which in the beginning I was like, what? Like, this is absurd. I assume it's gonna come up like later in the stories. Like, this whole idea was just a little absurd to me. I'm like, Alec is what, like 17? Like, they're gonna keep this baby. But the more it went on, the more I loved it, because Magnus and Alec obviously can't have their own children. They're 2 dudes. But what's even better about it is like, Magnus literally can't have children, you know? He's a warlock. You learn that they're like sterile. They can't have children. And I'm like, that just sucks. The idea that you live forever, but you can never really have a family. And this was just such a like perfect blessing given to them. Like, they get to raise this warlock child that was abandoned together. They end up naming it Max Whitewood, which, again, everybody having the same names. I get it, it's after Alex's dead brother, but like, it's so confusing. So they name the baby Max Whitewood. Cute. Katarina ends up telling Magnus that Simon's like changing the game of the Shadowhunter Academy. He has combined the Shadowhunters and the Mundanes together. He's made it a better place for Downworlders, all this stuff that she really like sees a light in him, that he's gonna be a game changer. Whatever. Simon goes and tells Isabel that he doesn't even need his memories back. He'll love her no matter what. Cute little moment. Okay, this moment literally like made my heart like at the end of the story, Magnus is like holding his baby and he tells the baby, because he mentions to Simon, him and Simon are having this whole discussion about like he's gonna have to pick a Shadowhunter name, and he's like, what made you pick your name? They're having like a little heart to heart, and Magnus is like, I once told you that like you and I one day will be the only people left like of their friend group, because they were both immortal at the time. And Simon's like, I don't remember that. And he's like, I know, like, you wouldn't, but yeah, you know, like, it's just gonna be me now, essentially. But then after he has the baby, he's like, he looks at the baby and he tells the baby the exact same thing. Like, one day it'll be just you and me. And that's crazy to think, because it's like, yeah, eventually Alec is gonna die. Like, he's a human. But Magnus and this baby will, like, live on forever, in theory. So that's so cool that, like, he has a warlock baby that he, like, adopted. Like, it just made my heart, like, explode. Like, it's everything they deserve, you know? Like, it's just cool. Okay, and then we get to the very last and final chapter, 2 Angels Descending. The first chunk of this chapter I genuinely really enjoyed, and then it ended, and so the second year finishes. George and Simon kind of have like a heart to heart, and George is like, you know, you're my brother, you're my best friend. Like, I know we can't be Parabatai because that's Clary, but like, I just want you to know, like, you're my best friend, you've changed my life, blah, blah, blah. They have this whole cute bro, like, heart to heart. Ascension Day is tomorrow. A few of the Mundanes have backed out because obviously there's a chance you like don't make it through Ascension. Clary portals to Simon to take him back to New York so that he can say goodbye essentially to his family, because once you ascend, you're supposed to like cut off all your ties to the mundane world. Whatever, he meets with his mom. He basically decides like, I'm not gonna totally give up this life. I'll find a way. Like, this isn't the last time I'm gonna see my mom. Izzy ends up meeting him outside the mom's house, whatever. They finally do the nasty. It's okay. Do the nasty. Am I 12 years old? Okay, Ascension ceremony happens. Simon drinks from the cup. All of his memories flood back, which was kind of a cool moment to see. He remembers everything. So, okay, I want to say, like 5 chapters earlier, I'm like, he has to pick a Shadowhunter name now. I was beyond sure. I'm like, he's gonna pick Daylighter. Like, that is so cool, because his whole thing was like combining the Mundanes and the Shadowhunters, like making it an equal playing field, like no one's better than anyone. So I'm like, that'd be so cool to go by that name, because people called him that for so long. Katarina Lost still calls him that. I'm like, Simon Daylighter, super cool. That's what I called. But we're gonna find out that's not what he picked. So he goes and he drinks from the cup, and then after him is George, which right as soon as this happened, right as soon as he was walking away and George was walking up, I was like, George is gonna die. George is gonna die. So George drinks from the cup and he freaking violently, horribly dies. Because I guess he wasn't worthy. And it was so freaking sad. Like, it was so sad. And like, I mean, you have to expect, like, the whole thing is not everyone is meant to be a Shadowhunter. Someone has to not make it. But just the fact that it was George was just so sad. And then the book literally ends like 5 pages later. Like, Simon goes to visit the grave of George, and we end up seeing George and Jessamine as ghosts or whatever. And Simon essentially decides that he's gonna go by Simon Lovelace. He's gonna take George's name, which I'm like, okay. I mean, Simon Lovelace is very cute, but I'm like, why weren't you original? Like, which I don't know. Let me know. Like, can you not pick your own Shadowhunter name? I totally figured you could. I just thought Simon Daylighter, like, such a missed opportunity, man. But you know, they're all about whatever, honoring each other. So yeah, he's now Simon Lovelace, and then literally the book ends, and that's the end of the book. This video is gonna be so long, I'm sorry. But yeah, my overall thoughts, I really didn't love this book. I thought it was really disappointing. I mean, there were some parts that were really, like, that were cool. I enjoyed seeing the Tessa, Will, like, Jack the Ripper story. It was not necessary. But by far, like, my favorite chapter was the chapter where Magnus and Alec get the baby, because it just felt like Mortal Instruments, because every character from Mortal Instruments was in that chapter. It just felt like more of that story, but just all the other characters in this book I just didn't care for. I didn't even mention their names in this because it's like they just weren't important. I just felt like it was an entirely, like, I can understand. I mean, I'm reading this in the order that is like the suggested reading order, but I feel like this book would honestly be better for, I mean, it's hard to say because I haven't read the ones that come after this yet. Maybe there's some vital information in here that you do need, but I feel like this book would be so much better for, like, getting through all the series and then wait a few months, and then when you're really missing like the Shadowhunter world, then come back to this and get, like, if you're starving, get a little extra content. I'm gonna have to see. I'm definitely gonna make a video after I finish all of the books to tell you like what order I think that you should read it in, what I think is like the best experience, decide if like the experience I did was the best, all those things. But yeah, I don't know. I have to wonder. Like, my main complaint overall with this story is that it just didn't feel like the rest of the series. Like, the writing was just really bad at times. Like, I hate to say it, but it just, like, there were just some moments where I literally was sending screenshots to my friend that is also reading the series right now, and I was just like, it sounds like a 5th grader wrote this. Like, and I don't know if that's the co-authors, I don't know what, but I'm just like, you really read that back and like thought that sounded okay? Like, it just, there's some moments were really bad and disappointing, and I don't know, like, I just, when you have like 3 other co-authors, I have to wonder, like, how much is Cassandra Clare actually putting into this when she has 3 co-authors? And then the Ghost of the Shadow Market has 4 co-authors. So I'm like, girl, I don't know. Like, I'm gonna read it for sure. We're gonna see, but I hate to say I was disappointed in this. I hate that the first 2 reviews on this channel have been kind of negative, but yeah, I just have to be honest. Like, it's a book review, that's what it's for. I didn't love it. I didn't love it at all. So I'm definitely gonna finish the Shadowhunter series, but I'm gonna take a little miniature break just cause like I need to take a step back. This book was really like kind of rough for me to read because I was just not feeling it. I'm going to read My Policeman by Bethan Roberts. Harry Styles just got officially casted in the movie adaptation of that book, so I'm gonna take a little mini break to read that. For sure we'll be posting a review on that on this channel, and then I'll probably go back to the Shadowhunter series after that. But yes, that is it, guys. Longest video in history, but if you're still here, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you very soon. Okay, bye.